For nearly 2 decades, the world believed Gypsy Rose Blanchard was dying. Leukemia, muscular dystrophy, epilepsy, asthma, hearing and vision loss. She lived in a wheelchair, ate through a feeding tube, and her mother, Dee Dee, presented herself as the ultimate caregiver. Then in June 2015, Dee Dee was found unalived in their Springfield, Missouri home. Gypsy was missing. When she was located days later, walking freely and in perfect health, the truth exploded. Gypsy Rose had never been sick. Her mother had fabricated almost every illness for attention, money, and control. And Gypsy, desperate to escape decades of medical and psychological abuse, had arranged for her boyfriend to end Dee Dee's life. This is the full story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, one of the most disturbing and complex true crime cases of the 21st century. I am going to put a viewer warning because this video discusses prolonged child abuse, medical trauma, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which is actually now called factitious disorder imposed on another, and murder. I will be sticking strictly to verified court records, police records, medical findings and public statements. No graphic descriptions of the knifing will be included in this, and as always, respect to everyone that was involved. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was born on July 27th, 1991, in Golden Meadow, Louisiana, to Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard and Ron Blanchard. Ron was a teenager when Dee Dee became pregnant, but the couple separated shortly before Gypsy's birth. In her early years, Gypsy appeared healthy, but Dee Dee, who had worked as a nurse's aide, began claiming her infant daughter had sleep apnea. By the time Gypsy was a toddler and then a young child, the list of alleged illnesses grew. A chromosomal disorder, muscular dystrophy, epilepsy, leukemia, asthma, vision problems, and hearing impairment. Dee Dee told doctors and family that Gypsy required a wheelchair, a feeding tube, oxygen, and also multiple medications. She shaved Gypsy's head to mimic the effects of chemotherapy. Gypsy's teeth later decayed and were removed, which was a result, experts later said, of the medications and the unnecessary removal of her salivary glands. Hurricane Katrina in 2005 destroyed many of Gypsy's early medical records. Dee Dee actually used this loss to her advantage, restarting the medical narrative with new doctors in Missouri. The family received extensive community support, including a Habitat for Humanity house that was built specifically for them in Springfield in 2008. They got charity trips and donations, because what the public saw was a devoted mother caring for a severely disabled daughter. What was actually happening was systematic medical child abuse. Dee Dee controlled every aspect of Gypsy's life. She isolated her from school, friends, and actually much of her extended family. She told Gypsy she had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. She administered medications that were not needed and subjected her to unnecessary surgeries and procedures. At least one neurologist became suspicious and documented concerns about possible fabricated illnesses, but Dee Dee simply just switched doctors. Gypsy later stated that she gradually realised many of the claims were false, because she knew she could walk, she knew she could eat solid food, but she lived in fear of her mother's anger and retaliation. Escape attempts were met with punishment, and in 2011, as a young adult, although Dee Dee had presented her as much younger, Gypsy tried to run away with a man that she'd met at a science fiction convention. Dee Dee tracked her down, used falsified age documents, and then brought her home. This was classic factitious disorder imposed on another, formerly known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Dee Dee gained attention, sympathy, and financial benefits by presenting herself as the long-suffering caregiver of a chronically ill child. In 2012, Gypsy secretly began communicating online with Nicholas Godejohn, a man from Wisconsin that she met on a Christian dating site. Nicholas had documented history of autism and violent fantasies according to his family. They developed a close, intense relationship that included role-playing elements. Gypsy eventually told him the truth about her mother's abuse. By early 2015, they were planning their escape. They staged a chance meeting at a movie theatre in Springfield, with Gypsy in a Cinderella costume and Nicholas as Prince Charming. Dee Dee was furious when she found out. The couple began discussing more drastic options. Gypsy had stated that she asked Nicholas if he would kill her mother so they could be free. They called it Plan B. On June 9th or 10th, 2015, Nicholas travelled to Springfield. While Dee Dee was asleep, Gypsy led him into the house, provided him with a knife, gloves and duct tape. Gypsy hid in the bathroom with her hands over her ears while Nicholas used the knife to end Dee Dee's life by stabbing her multiple times. Afterwards, the pair took cash from the house, which was primarily child support money, and left. They stayed at a motel for a few days, then took a bus to Wisconsin. Before leaving, they mailed the murder weapon to Nicholas's home. Days later, posts appeared on Dee Dee's Facebook page. One read, "That bitch is dead," and another, more graphic message. Neighbours and friends then became alarmed. On June 14th, 2015, police found Dee Dee's body. Gypsy was actually initially believed to have been abducted. Gypsy and Nicholas were arrested in Wisconsin the next day when police saw Gypsy walking and appearing healthy. And that is literally when the entire medical narrative collapsed. Investigators discovered the extent of the fabricated illnesses. Medical records, when pieced together, showed no evidence for most of the claimed conditions. Gypsy's real health issues were limited primarily to a mild lazy eye. The community that had supported the sick girl and the devoted mother was stunned. Prosecutors described the case as extraordinary. The years of abuse were considered significant mitigating circumstances for Gypsy. In July 2016, she accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder, and she was sentenced to 10 years in prison, the minimum possible. Greene County Prosecutor Dan Patterson publicly noted the extreme mitigating factors of the long-term systematic abuse. Nicholas went to trial in 2018. Gypsy actually testified against him, stating that the plan originated with her. A jury found him guilty of first-degree murder and armed criminal action. In February 2019, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, plus a concurrent 25-year term. The sentencing disparity, Gypsy's 10 years versus Nicholas' life, remains one of the most discussed aspects of this case. Gypsy served just over 8 years, and she was granted parole and released on December the 28th, 2023. And in the years since, she's lived a highly public life. She married Ryan Scott Anderson in 2022, while she was actually still incarcerated. The marriage ended in separation and divorce in 2024, and she later rekindled a relationship with Ken Aker and welcomed a daughter, Aurora. She completed her parole program in June 2025. She has appeared in Lifetime documentaries, published a memoir titled My Time to Stand, and has spoken about accountability, motherhood, and reclaiming your life. As of 2026, she continues to navigate public scrutiny while raising a child. Nicholas Gojohn remains incarcerated and has pursued legal appeals. Gypsy has said she takes responsibility for her role in her mother's death, while also emphasising the decades of abuse that shaped her choices. The case continues to spark debate about victimhood, accountability, medical child abuse, and the justice system's response to long-term trauma. The story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, it's not a simple story. It's a story of prolonged abuse, of a mother's psychological disorder that destroyed a child's reality, and of a desperate young woman who saw murder as her only way out. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about how communities can miss clear signs of medical child abuse, and about how the legal system weighs years of victimisation against a single, irreversible act. Whatever your view is of Gypsy's choices, the lasting damage was done to a little girl who was never actually allowed to live a normal life. If this deep dive is something you're into and has helped you understand the full picture, please do like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I cover these cases with care, and thank you very much for listening and watching.